Hello, everyone. We have almost 100 participants from around the world. I'm Alec Farker from Workplace Health Without Borders. I'm the convener of our Asbestos Working Group, which is a truly global working group, just as we are trying to be a truly global organization. We schedule the timing of these webinars so that we can cover virtually the whole world. There are people on the webinar from the West Coast of the United States and Canada who had to get up at 4 in the morning. And we have people on the call from Australia who are staying up late at night. And in between, we have the whole globe. And welcome, everyone. Today is the fourth asbestos webinar that Workplace Health Without Borders has organized. And this one's really, as you'll see, the one we've been putting our hopes onto the most, because it's where we draw together the themes, the information, and the dialogue from the previous ones and try to raise it to the global level and make a contribution to those countries which are striving to ban asbestos, and ultimately all the countries striving to eliminate it from their built environment. And today will be structured as a dialogue where people speaking to 3 countries that still use asbestos will explain what they're facing, what they need to make a transition, and then people from 4 countries which have achieved a ban in varying circumstances will speak about how they did that and what lessons there might be for others who are striving to do the same thing. And we're fortunate, of course, to have Ambassador Bob Rae, Canada's ambassador to the United Nations, leading off with remarks, and he'll be introduced by Dr. Jukka Takala. We're very privileged to have with us moderating through the event, and I'll very, very briefly introduce Jukka and then hand it over to him. Jukka is a renowned global expert in occupational health and safety, and we'll be circulating bios later with details, but I think for purposes here, he is past president of the International Commission on Occupational Health and has had a practically career-long involvement with the asbestos issue and many other issues of hazards in the workplace. So Jukka, over to you.
Thank you, Alec, and thank you very much for the invitation and being present here. I think it's an important thing to talk this globally, and I think it's one of the most key issues, problems we have also in occupational safety and health in the whole world. And my first task over here, I come now from Finland, in between Australia and Canada, quite in the northern part, but really nice sunshine here as well in Finland, and a nice day. So my first job is here to introduce Honorary Bob Rae, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Canada to the United Nations. Bob Rae is the Ambassador Permanent Representative, and he served as a Premier of Ontario from 1990 to 1995, and interim leader of the Liberal Party of Canada from 2011 to 2013. He was elected to federal and provincial parliaments 11 times between 1978 and 2013. He received his honors in Bachelor of Modern History from the University of Toronto and PhD in politics and Rhodes Scholar of Oxford University, and graduated from the University of Toronto, Faculty of Law, 1977. He was named a Queen's Counsel in 1984. As a lawyer and in a private practice, Mr. Rae led the restructuring of the Canadian Red Cross, the Toronto Symphony Orchestra, and chaired the board of the Royal Conservatory of Music. He also wrote the lessons to be learned of the Air India bombing, and Ontario, a leader in learning, a study of the Ontario higher education system. He was also named to the Secretary of the Intelligence Review Committee by the Premier Minister Chrétien. Mr. Rae's return to Parliament for the constituency of Toronto Centre in 2008 led to his appointment as a foreign affairs spokesman for his party to his election as an interim leader in 2011. Between 2013 and 20, he taught law and public policy in the University of Toronto and was a partner and senator and senior counsel to the law firm OKT LLP, specializing in indigenous law and constitutional issues. To go further. In 1997, Mr. Rae became a founding board member of the Forum of Federations. He went on to serve as a chairman and president of the forum and advised many governments and groups on issues of constitutional change, the rule of law, federalism, and devolution. He remains a senior fellow of the forum. Mr. Rae is also a senior fellow at Massey College and the Raoul Wallenberg Center for Human Rights. He served as the chief negotiator for the 9 First Nations that are members of the Matava Tribal Council in Northern Ontario between 2013 and 2018. In October 2018, Mr. Rae was appointed as Canada's special envoy to Myanmar. In this role, he engaged in diplomatic efforts to address the crisis in the country's Rakhine state and wrote the report, Tell Them We Are Human, in 2018. In March 2020, he was named by Prime Minister Trudeau to be Canada's special envoy on humanitarian refugee issues. This led to his report, A Global Pandemic Requires a Global Response, which was made public shortly before his appointment as ambassador to the UN. Bob Rae is a private council, a companion of the Order of Canada, a member of the Order of Ontario, and has numerous awards and honorary degrees from institutions in Canada and around the world. In addition to several government reports, he is the author of 5 books. Along with music, reading, and writing, he loves tennis, golf, and fishing. He's married to Arlene Pearlie Rae, writer and public advocate on issues affecting women and children. They have 3 daughters and 6 grandchildren. So I think this is all what I have to tell about Bob Rae, and I'm very happy to then go to the next step of the agenda.
Thank you very much, Jukka, for that introduction. I'm very happy to be able to join you today. I'm sorry I can't be here for the whole conference, but I think I hardly recognize myself in that introduction, so I'm very grateful for you having given it to me. The issue of asbestos has actually been an interest of mine and a concern of mine for over 50 years, which is when I met Alec. Alec Farker and I were fellow students at the University of Toronto Law School, and we worked at a clinic called the Union of Injured Workers, and that was my first experience of actually meeting people who suffered from cancer and other diseases as a result of asbestosis, because we had a large asbestos making factory in Toronto at that time. And I have to say that Alec has remained faithful to the cause of occupational health and safety and workers' health and safety for over 50 years. I mean, I had the pleasure of working with him later on when I became premier, and he was a senior advisor to the Ministry of Labor on occupational health and safety issues. And ALEC has really kept alive this issue in Canada. While we look at the progress that we've made around the world, we've made significant progress. Canada really only joined the ban on asbestos in 2018, which is kind of remarkable when you think about it. But it took us a very, very long time to convince governments that this is something that needed to happen. When I was in provincial politics, when I was Premier of Ontario, we made considerable progress in identifying the diseases and making sure that everybody understood what the causes of it were. But under our constitutional system, the federal government had responsibility ultimately for making a decision about how to deal with this question. And it took a long time. And so I think one of the things that I would try to contribute to your dialogue is to say this is a struggle, because there will be many people who will try to deny that asbestos is a problem. There'll be many people who will question the science. There'll be many people who will talk about the jobs that are involved, and of course that's extremely important. But above all else, I think we need to understand that it's by showing our shared commitment to people's health, and also our shared commitment to the facts and to the science, that only leads in one direction, and that is that this is a very dangerous substance that kills people. And as you know, the latest data from recently is that close to 240,000 people have been killed by diseases related to asbestos and its production and its use. And so we need to understand that there is a clear, scientifically based link between asbestos and a number of diseases related to asbestos, and asbestosis, mesothelioma, and other forms of cancer, which can clearly be traced to asbestos without any question. So the science is leading us in an important direction. And I guess if I was to offer some words of encouragement, it would be to say that all we need to do is to tell the truth, and to find out the truth about this substance, and also to find out and to be clear about the costs and consequences of not taking it seriously. And we need to understand that there will be many advocates and many people on the other side. There will be many economic and other interests which will be fighting it, but the data is very, very clear. And numbers do have a very clear impact. The International Agency for Research on Cancer, which is part of the World Health Organization, has played a very strong role in identifying this question and in working on it. And so there really are two key UN organizations, both of them based in Geneva, the World Health Organization and the International Labour Office, the ILO. The reason that the ILO is so critically important is because it focuses on the occupational, on workers' health and safety issues directly. The World Health Organization really relates to the broader issues of why do people get cancer and where does it come from? And in many cases, we can identify it. Just as we identified the relationship between cancer and tobacco, we can identify very clearly the relationship between asbestos, its use, its production, and its use to cancer. So there's no question about it. At both these organizations, at the ILO and the WHO, countries have an opportunity to talk about this issue and to share the information, to share the perspective that has led them to take the additional steps which many countries have now taken in banning the substance. And we have formal accords. One of them, the example, is the Rotterdam Convention, which, if I may say so, ALEC used very effectively in his absolutely tenacious lobbying and persuasion of governments on why it was extremely important for Canada to join this work. And the commission, which is set up by the convention, does not actually ban any substance, but it requires notification of international trade so that an importing country will have the opportunity for prior and informed consent. It's been a success for most types of asbestos, but progress on the most widely used type of asbestos, which is called chrysotile, also known as white asbestos, has been stalled for a number of years by the opposition of a few countries. Canada used to be a member of that group and left the group and it joined the band. But that took an incredible amount of effort, both political, if you like, but also a moral persuasion. And it would not have happened without the leadership of advocates like Alec, and it would not have happened without the leadership of the labor movement itself, because it's really important to realize that it's labor organizations that are basing their campaigns on strong scientific data, on the data that tells us that this is what is happening. And I think that really is the key point. It takes using the information that's now publicly available and is absolutely clear, and it's also about having the willingness to be tenacious and to be strong in our advocacy. And I think the strength of this group is the strength of coordination and continuing to discuss with governments, continuing to discuss with people in the labor movement more broadly, but sharing the perspective. And trust me, we know it's difficult. Let me close by telling you a story. The father of the Prime Minister of Canada was also Prime Minister of Canada, Pierre Elliott Trudeau. And Pierre Elliott Trudeau, as a young lawyer and a young advocate, wrote a very famous book about a strike that took place in the town of Asbestos, which was the name of the town where asbestos was made in the province of Quebec. And in the book that he wrote, he described this strike and why it was an important moment in the life of the community. And one of the things that happened as a result of that was that asbestos became very much the center of this fight for labor rights and for union rights. But Mr. Trudeau Sr. did not talk about this as a health and safety issue, because at the time, the workers wouldn't hear of it. The unions were not in favor of it because there were so many people who were working in the industry. So it took a long time for Canadians to come to grips with this question as a key health and safety issue, and as an issue that, above all, affects the lives and the health of people, not only people who were involved in the manufacture or the mining of asbestos, but people who are involved in construction and who are involved in the places where asbestos is still very much in the building. It has a huge historical legacy in many large infrastructure projects and buildings around the world. And so I say to this international audience, this is not about one country telling other countries what to do. This is about a group of people who have the lived experience of knowing what this fight is all about, and who know that it isn't easy, and who know that it's going to take a struggle, and it's going to take commitment, and it's going to take persistence. Persistence that, as I say, is based on the facts. The emotions are clear enough. Alec and I have had many good discussions about what the impact that this had on us as individuals. And so I'm really proud to be able to join you in my role now, and I wouldn't be here without Alec, who encouraged me to come forward. I'm very happy to do so, and to say that it is a challenging issue, but it is critically important for the health and safety of workers around the world. Because the center now of the industry is in many developing countries where it's more difficult at the moment to kind of make the change and make that movement happen. But until we get a complete international ban on asbestos, we cannot rest. And I think that's the clear direction that the science is taking us, and that's the direction that the health and safety of working people is taking us. And so that's where we have to go. It's not easy, but we have to get there. And I think this kind of a conversation and this dialogue is critically important as we talk about what does it take to get to the next step, how do we build the numbers of those countries that are coming forward, and how do we make progress. So thank you very much for this opportunity. I really appreciate the chance to join you. Unfortunately, I have to leave you now, but I really look forward to hearing about your deliberations from Alec and from others, and really appreciate the chance to be with you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ambassador Rae. I think this is excellent opening for the meeting itself, for the webinar itself. And I also really happy to hear about the references to ILO, WHO, international efforts. International efforts are really important. At the same time, these big bodies, UN, WHO, ILO, they are only as strong as the member states are. So we need to work also on the member state level to get things done. So thank you again for your great contribution. And then we go to the next speaker over here. That is Dr. Tran Wind. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but you can correct me. She is an associate professor in the Division of Environmental Health Sciences at the University of Minnesota School of Public Health. Dr. Tran is an associate professor and in the Division of Environmental Health Sciences at the University School of Public Health. She's an occupational hygiene faculty member and outreach director of the NIOSH-funded Midwest Center for Occupational Health and Safety Education and Research Center. Her work centers around community-based participatory research and environmental and occupational health with the aim of reducing health disparities. She is a certified industrial hygienist and with experience working with immigrant-owned, under-resourced small businesses, for example, hair and nail salons, to maintain safe work environments. She uses both qualitative and quantitative research methods to document health disparities among underserved populations and enjoys working collaboratively with academics, non-profit organizations, and governmental agencies on public policy and program to remove structural barriers for underserved communities to achieve their optimal health and well-being. In her current global work, she collaborates with Workplace Health Without Borders and Vietnamese universities and governmental agencies to support capacity building activities in occupational health and safety in Vietnam. So, Dr. Tran, you have the floor.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Takala, for the introduction. I will be the moderator for this session. It is my pleasure to introduce our next set of speakers who will discuss some of the main challenges to achieving asbestos ban in countries that are still using asbestos. I will just briefly introduce them, and their longer bio will be sent out to you later on. Oh, sorry. There's a clicking in my computer. And so our first speaker will be Mr. Ton Nguyen, President Emeritus of Workplace Health Without Borders, U.S. branch. He will present on the current situation in Vietnam. Mr. Ton Nguyen has more than 30 years of experience working as an industrial hygiene safety consultant with the California State Compensation Insurance Fund. Outside of his main job, he's working with Vietnamese universities and governmental agencies for more than 20 years to support occupational health and safety capacity building initiatives in Vietnam. Then for our second speaker, Dr. Gopal Krishna, co-founder of the Ban Asbestos Network of India, will share insights about asbestos ban efforts in India. Dr. Krishna has been working on the subject of health hazards in hazardous industries like asbestos industry and shipwrecking industry since 2000. And then lastly, we'll have Mr. Arseny Wikramatilake. I'm sorry if I mispronounce your names. He's a strong advocate in promoting occupational health and hygiene in Sri Lanka. and he will discuss asbestos challenges in Sri Lanka. Mr. Wikramalake is a senior occupational health practitioner in Sri Lanka and is actively involved in various occupational health associations, including Sri Lanka Workplace Safety and Health Association, Workplace Health Without Border, and the International Commission on Occupational Health. And so with that brief introduction of our speakers, and I will leave the remaining time for speakers to share, to present their talk. So first, Mr. Tongren.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. My name is Tuan Nguyen, and today it's my pleasure to be part of the team to present the roadmap to a global asbestos ban. Vietnam haven't done that, but I hope that maybe at the end of this talk, we will be able to understand some of their situation and also maybe come up with some recommendation for them. This original talk, I invited Dr. Do Quốc Quang. He's the former Vice Director of the Institute of Technology in the Ministry of Industry and Trade. However, he couldn't attend the meeting. So I use some of his information plus whatever we have from other agencies to compile this study, this presentation for you. So with that, let's talk a little bit about asbestos. Why do we use them? We use them because it has so many incredible properties. Some of them, they are strong, flexible, fireproof. They are used as good insulator against heat, electricity, and it also resists corrosion. Because of those properties, they are being used widely in Vietnam in many places. However, all 6 of them that listed here. Number 1 is the chrysotile under the 17 mineral. It's labeled white asbestos. And the other 5, the arsenolite, amosite, anthophyllite, the crocidolite, and the tremolite. Some of them also are classified as carcinogen. So because of that, even though we are using them, but we try to reduce the reliability or the that we have to use asbestos for. Here are some of the main uses in Vietnam. For construction, they are mainly used to produce asbestos roofing sheet. Right now, they try to use other products to replace that. But we also use them in shipbuilding, in boiler maintenance, in brakes, for automobile, and in foundry and metallurgy like apron, gloves, anything that can take care of the heat. We also import some products into Vietnam, for example, the asbestos sheet, fabric, insulator, ropes, fire-resistant cloths, and gasket. This is one of the ship building industry, and they mainly use it for maybe insulator for electrical and also for the boiler area. Yeah. So asbestos have been used in Vietnam since the 1960s. And as you know, Vietnam had a war between the North and the South. And we did not reunite until 1975. So before that, I don't know who kept the record and whether or not the record have been combined later. But Vietnam is among the world top 10 largest user of asbestos, and we import about 60,000 tons per year. And now from our estimation, between 1960 to 1991, we probably import about between 10 or 15 tons per year. So that's roughly about 300 tons. And then between 92 to 22, we import about 1,500 tons. So together, we roughly have about maybe 1.5 million metric tons of asbestos floating around in the country somewhere, either in the bricks, in the roof, on the roof, or someplace. So that's about 2 million tons of asbestos in Vietnam. This is some of the detailed information. This came from different publications and also from the World Bank data. There are some years that you see the gap, even though we don't have the tonnage of the products, but we do have the value, the money that we spend to order them in. So, but by extrapolation, we know roughly, they probably between, like for this one, they between maybe 12 and 14. For this one, probably in the high 50 and then in the low 60. So we can just add them up. And if I do it that way with the extrapolation, probably close to 15,000 tons. I mean, yeah, about 1.5 million tons. So Vietnam have passed many laws to lead to the ban of asbestos. Vietnam know the hazard, the health hazard that they have, but maybe because of the economic issue and also the availability of the substitutes. So they have some problem in terms of enacting the ban. But in 2001, the Prime Minister passed a law try to push the country to adopt advanced technology that are more friendly to the environment, and also abolish the use of amphibole group of asbestos. The white asbestos still allowed. However, the guidelines for using them are very strict, and they have to be monitored, have to control to ensure that the worker health are not affected. And in 2008, another decision came out and said that the use of chrysotile is permitted until 2020 in the manufacturing of asbestos roofing sheet under the strict monitoring of the working environment and worker health. There are some other regulations, for example, the implementation of workplace exposure concentration for asbestos fiber not to exceed 0.1 fiber per cc in the air for 8 hours, and does not exceed the 0.5 fiber per cc of air on the average of 1 hour. And then in 2022, there a decree came out, applied the penalty for violation of regulation on production and trading of used construction material with asbestos. And in 2022, another law regulated the hazard waste disposal and management, which could encompass material like asbestos. So this is the annual asbestos import into Vietnam. As you can see, they are steadily increased and very high during the early 2000 up to 2011. And then this is more recent from 2015, 2022, we see a sharp decline in the import of the products into Vietnam. So that means the ban is partially effective, but we still rely on asbestos. So there are some good news. There's a decline in asbestos import in recent years, reflecting Vietnam's commitment to improve public health and worker safety. the decrease in asbestos fiber import partly due to the increased awareness and the availability of the alternate products or the substitutes. And the import and production of asbestos containing roofing sheet have been significantly declined, dropping about 66%. So what is exactly the ban that Vietnam imposed into the industry? The goal is to replace asbestos fiber in the production of asbestos sheet, and to make sure that we use some other product like fibro cement, so make it safer for human health, to ensure that reasonable price for roofing sheet that are affordable in disadvantaged locality. Most of the products that come into Vietnam are used to make the roofing sheet in area in the high mountain, because these people are very poor, and they have been used widely up there, and they are cheap material. They have the ability to withstand heat, and they last for a long time. So that's how they've been used in Vietnam. And the goal is to stop production of the roofing sheet using crystal tile by 2030. So the specific goal is from 2025 to 2030. We try not to use more than 3% of asbestos in the composition. And also, by 2030, roofing manufacturer will not use crystal tile in the composition of roofing material. So, how worker safety? In 2009, 10, and 11, we monitor for asbestos exposure. Out of 56 samples in 2009, 3 exceeded the PEL. 2010, out of 71 samples, only 1 sample exceeded. 2011, only 1 sample exceeded the PEL out of 54 samples. However, in 2021, there have been a study conducted, and it found that 108 samples out of 206 samples had a dose that exceed the PEL level. So this is a significant neglect in terms of human health and worker safety from these manufacturers. So there are many barriers that prevent the country to move forward to the ban quickly, that involved with the government policy are not very specific. They have not created motivation for businesses that have and will convert to producing non-asbestos products. The research and development of non-asbestos products have not been given adequate attention. The long-term systemic research has only been implemented mainly in the Ministry of Industry and Trade and the Ministry of Science and Technology. Information about non-asbestos products is currently very unclear about the durability, ability to accept technology, the price of the products. There are lack of coordination between research unit and management unit among the in-charge ministries. Some other barriers are involved with finding affordable and equally durable substitute for construction purposes. Because as you know, asbestos products, it has so many properties. So to be able to replace something like that, you have to use many compounds. Each of them will have to have some characteristic that in combination, it has the equivalent benefit of the asbestos products. And the non-asbestos roofing sheet are approximately 14% more expensive to produce than the asbestos one. with the same quality. And the market pricing often reflect 30 to 40% higher cost of non-asbestos roofing sheet compared to those containing asbestos. And the price disparity is expected to diminish as soon as we have more company produce roofing sheet and expand it to make it more economical. So in the asbestos substitute, we have cellular fiber, amorphous silica fabric, polyurethane foam, mineral wool, polyvinyl alcohol synthetic fiber, pop additive. There are other fiber like the polypropylene, polyvinyl chloride, polyacrylonitrile, and Kuralon fiber, that actually polyvinyl alcohol. These in combination, they can be used to make asbestos substitute. So this is one of the formula to use to make the non-asbestos cement product. As you can see, the one on the top roofing sheet that using asbestos. You can see that the cost is about 44,000 piastres, Vietnamese dong. And then here is the non-asbestos product. We have a combination of PVA, paper powder, silica film, bentonite, flocculant. All this add up. We have a cost about 50,500 piastres. So that about 13 or 14% more expensive between the substitute and the asbestos product. But to be able to get this price, you also have to spend a lot of money to convert your manufacturing line to upgrade them to be able to produce this non-asbestos product. So here are some of the non-asbestos roof sheet production line. And then this one is fully automated. So it costs a lot more to put a line like this into operation. So to be able to come to achieve the asbestos ban, Vietnam need to do a lot more. It needs to make a clear and actionable plan to eliminate asbestos use, ensuring the safety of workers and the general population. The government needs to provide additional support, research into alternative material, and implement state-level projects to develop non-asbestos roofing technology. And need to accelerate the market demand for non-asbestos roofing products, both domestically and internationally, to prevent future health risks associated with asbestos use, and also assist the Ministry and Trade and the Ministry of Science and Technology to transfer the research finding to enterprise and other stakeholders. There are some invention that came out from this ministry in terms of making non-asbestos products, and their patent have been submitted, and the Ministry of Industry and Trade have been monopolized on that patent, and they have been producing non-asbestos products and sell them internationally. So I don't know if that technology been shared or licensed to people in country to produce that same products or not, but they are exported over the world. So in a way, we have not come to the full effect of the ban, but there are some positive note. The Vietnamese scientists patented the asbestos-free cement roofing sheet technology in 2007. And the first production line of this kind of roofing sheet were established in Haejuong City. They have been sold, and other countries in the region adopted that technology like Laos, Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, Sri Lanka, Iran, and Uzbekistan. And the Ministry of Industry and Trade Research Group provide the technology consultant to these countries. So the pattern were the use PVA fiber technology to produce the non-asbestos roofing sheet. They also work with some company, Japanese company, to produce the Kuralon fiber products. And when they export the product, it meets the Japanese and the Korean industry standard of the asbestos, non-asbestos roofing sheet. So I think that's it for my talk, and I would like to let you all know that there is a upcoming seminar or conference in Vietnam in October 24 to 26 in Hanoi. And the theme is health hazard of chronic occupational exposure to hazard compound from construction and manufacturing sector. So we will send out the call for abstract, and hopefully some of you can participate either as the presenter, oral, or present a poster. So please stay tuned for more announcement regarding this conference, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dong, for a very informative presentation about Vietnam's asbestos use. So next we have Dr. Gopal-Krishna, who will who will share insights about India's situation.
Namaskar from India. I will come straight to the point. I would like to know how much time I have for the presentation.
10 minutes for each presenter.
Am I audible? How much time I have for the presentation?
10 minutes
Okay.
for each presenter.
I would propose that we are bit reducing the time because we are badly late already. So if we can make it in 7-8 minutes, that would be fine.
So India is world's largest importer and consumer of asbestos. And in the year 2021, India used 408,000 tons. And in the next year, in 2022, India used 424,000 tons of asbestos. In June 2024, this month, the Indian government, new government has come into power, and they have taken, the ministers have taken oath. And the Minister of Health has taken oath, and he has also taken oath as Minister of Chemicals. The Minister of Health and Minister of Chemicals, Mr. J.P. Nadda, has taken oath. In the previous government also, from 2021 onwards, the Health Minister was also the Chemical Minister. So the reason I begin with this is that it underlines a conflict of interest, because in India, Ministry of Chemicals is the focal point for chemicals, hazardous chemicals and hazardous substances. So as a Minister of Chemicals, he promotes hazardous chemicals and substances like asbestos. And as Minister of Health, he has to regulate it. So that conflict of interest, I wanted to underline. In June this year, this has happened. In the previous month, in May, even while the election process was underway, the Press Trust of India, India's news agency, reported that the Ministry of Commerce has issued an asbestos fiber-based products quality control order, and this has been issued by Ministry of Commerce. The Ministry of Commerce is very important to note because it is the same ministry which had made India take a position in the WTO appellate body, and before that India should not support the European community's position on ban on chrysotile asbestos. So the Commerce Ministry in India remains caught in a time warp. The April 2001 report of the appellate body of WTO rejected India's position with regard to chrysotile asbestos. Indian position in the WTO appellate body was inconsistent because Supreme Court of India in 1995 had passed an order where it had said, it had given 6 directions, and it had said one of the very important directions was that Indian laws and regulations will be revised and updated, keeping in view the fresh resolutions from international level organization. So the ILO resolutions were not factored in and has not been factored in till date by India. And therefore, given the fact that ILO passed a resolution in 2006 recommending total elimination of all kinds of asbestos, including chrysotile asbestos, the Supreme Court of India's direction with regard to updating the law in the light of fresh resolution of ILO has not been complied with. So the May 2024 quality fiber-based products quality control order in India, the asbestos industry is afraid of using the word asbestos. They have started using the word fiber or composite. They don't use the word asbestos. Even in their own associations name, the lobbying association they have, earlier their lobbying association used to be called Asbestos Cement Products Manufacturer Association. Now it is called Fiber Products Asbestos and Fiber Products Manufacturers Association. So they are moving away from it. Another very important moment, I'm beginning in a chronological order. So in May 2024, this Asbestos Cement Product Manufacturer Association filed an affidavit in National Green Tribunal, which is the environmental court in India, environmental tribunal in India, wherein one Mr. Raja Singh, Dr. Raja Singh, who is an occupational health researcher, filed a case seeking ban on all kinds of asbestos. That industry association has filed an affidavit where it cites the Supreme Court order of 1995, but it chooses very mischievously and notoriously chooses not to mention ILO resolution in the directions. The Supreme Court order of 1995 had said, and it continues to be operative, and there is none case of non-compliance in India. That orders had given 6 directions. One direction, the first direction was that all asbestos workers who are working in asbestos factory, their health record needs to be kept for 40 years. And their health record has to be kept 15 years after retirement. No asbestos factory in India is complying with this order. Another direction of the Supreme Court of India was that if National Institute of Occupational Health certifies a person to be suffering from asbestos related disease, that person will have to be compensated with 1 lakh of Indian rupees, which is 1/10 of a million in Indian currency. But till date, no one has been compensated. Even when NIOH, National Institute of Occupational Health, certified it, those workers were not compensated. Now I will come to 3-4 studies by NIOH, and then I will move towards conclusion. The National Institute of Occupational Health did a study on hazards of asbestos, on the hazards of chrysotile asbestos. That study was admittedly co-sponsored by asbestos industry. The minister has admitted in the parliament that the study was co-sponsored by the asbestos industry. 26% of that study, 26% of that funding for the study came from the asbestos industry, and the remaining 74% came from the chemical ministry. which is also a conflict of interest because the mandate of chemical ministry is to promote trade and commerce in hazardous substances like asbestos. There was a study done by this very institute, National Institute of Occupational Health, with regard to asbestos handling in shipbreaking industry. And this study found that 15 out of 94 workers were occupationally exposed to asbestos. And it found that 16% of these workers were exposed. It underlined it. The report was filed in the Supreme Court, but none of the workers were compensated. What is in the most recent case, a study by Directorate General Factory Advice Service and Labor Institute, a study was done on 2,603 workers between November 2018 and February 2019 for a period of less than 1 year. And that study said its finding was that 10 cases of suspected cases of asbestos related diseases have been found. 10 out of 2,603. This study has been disputed by a paper by Dr. Raja Singh and Professor Arthur Frank in their paper published in June 21, 2023 in Public Health Action Journal. They have disputed it on two grounds. One, that the study does not factor in disease latency period because the incubation period for diseases, asbestos-related diseases to manifest itself is large. It can be 10 years, 25 years, 50 years, but they have studied it only for less than 1 year, and they have reached the conclusion that only 10 cases have been found. And the second objection, which Professor Arthur Frank and Dr. Raja Singh have pointed out in their paper, is there is no record of external peer review. So this study is also discredited. The first study done by NIOH, which I referred to, which was conflict of interest ridden, that is the only study which is a conflict of interest ridden study. Admittedly, a conflict of interest ridden study, which is cited by Indian government at every international forum to take the position that asbestos, chrysotile asbestos, need not be included in the prior informed consent list of hazardous chemicals in the Rotterdam Convention. And that study is also cited to take the position that asbestos and chrysotile asbestos did not be banned. A conflict of interest related study is an impediment in the way in India choosing not to support ban on asbestos. There were 3 cases, and I will briefly mention 3 cases in the National Green Tribunal with regard to asbestos. One was with regard to shipbreaking in 2020, November 2020, and they said that containment of asbestos, they felt that containment and controlled handling of asbestos can be safe, which the international medical literature shows is not safe. It does not provide any safety to workers. The second case was with regard to asbestos mining. The mining in India asbestos mining in India is banned. We are totally dependent on foreign asbestos, Russian asbestos, Brazilian asbestos, Kazakh asbestos, and Chinese asbestos. 85% of the asbestos which India uses comes from Russia, and 3% comes from Brazil, 3% comes from Kazakhstan. This case of NGT in the mining case, there was a study submitted to the Green Tribunal. The study showed that out of 565 local residents near a leftover asbestos mine, 164 of the residents were showing symptoms of asbestos diseases. This conclusively demonstrates that the rate of exposure, not only of workers, of residents, the secondary exposure, here in this case, there is primary exposure, is also quite huge. Lastly, there was an affidavit which I mentioned, and towards conclusion, I will say that the reason Indian government is not taking a position with regard to complete ban on asbestos have been taken 2 steps towards ban. One, ban on mining of asbestos. Second, ban on trade in asbestos waste. Thirdly, all the Indian railway platforms are being phased out. They are phasing out asbestos cement roofs and they are replacing it. But Government of India continues to depend on Russian asbestos, Brazilian asbestos, and Kazakh asbestos. And this is a completely untenable, unscientific position. It's an indefensible position because Government of India would like people of India and the world at large to believe that Indian asbestos is carcinogenic, but Russian asbestos is not. Indian asbestos is poisonous, but Russian and Brazilian and Kazakh asbestos is not. This is indefensible. So toward the end,
Dr. Crispa, I'm sorry for interruption. So in the interest of time for the next speakers, can you offer a concluding remark so that for your session so we can move to the next speaker?
Yeah, Tran, I'm concluding. Towards conclusion, I will say that the only reason why Government of India continues to support commerce in trade, commerce, and use of asbestos is because ruling parties are getting corporate funding from the asbestos industry. Section 182 of Companies Act is responsible because it provides up to 7.5% of the annual profit of companies in general and asbestos companies in particular to the ruling parties. And therefore, this corporate finance of ruling parties is the only reason why we see continued use of asbestos in India. I will conclude by saying that the ray of hope is that a people's resistance in the state of Bihar and Odisha in eastern India saw a stoppage of asbestos factory, 5 asbestos factory in Bihar and 1 asbestos factory in Odisha. It is the people's struggle which shows ray of hope, but the public institutions are compromised because of corporate financing of ruling parties. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Dr. Krishna. So next we have Asini to present situation in Sri Lanka.
Hello, good evening from Sri Lanka. I'll try to be quick. I'm very much aware of the time constraints. So to start with, this is a picture I've taken recently. This is the true scenario in Sri Lanka, you know, at households, even when they replace an asbestos roofing sheet that is, you know, damaged, they keep it at home, they have it around, and there's a lot of damaged asbestos debris all over the country that we see. I'm sure we see that in many parts of the world, in this part of the world. So if I move, you know, just to give an idea on India and Sri Lanka, the sizes, the population, and then the use of asbestos, we use quite a lot. We use, I think, 7%, 7 times more than India, with its population of nearly 1.4 billion and ours of 22 million. And we import asbestos, mainly 80+% of our asbestos imported from Russia. And we are one of the, you know, we import more than 5% of the global, you know, asbestos. So if I talk about the asbestos users in Sri Lanka, it's mainly for roofing sheets, then and then people are exposed, especially in the construction and demolition industry. Then tsunami, we saw enormous amount of asbestos exposure. Then in the vehicle brake pads and things like that as well. So the roofing material currently we used initially in the olden days, it was clay roofing, but you know, because it's small tiles and it's easily damaged with you know, monkeys and things like, you know, that kind of animals in the villages, they started using asbestos roofing sheets. And currently, this was a recent study that was done, and it shows, you know, we are now getting more into concrete as well. But we still use quite a lot of asbestos roofing sheets because for the reasons Tuan mentioned of, you know, it being cheap and fire resistant and all those reasons. So clay is still used, and we are also trying to use a lot of aluminium roofing sheets. Let me just, this is a very short video. Let me show you. This is actually a colleague of mine, you know, out of his window, he just videoed this and sent it to me. So this is asbestos roofing sheet. You know, they're cleaning it and they're actually scrubbing it and dust is coming out, you know. they drill it, they do all kinds of things while they're on the roof. So it's not only roofing sheet manufacturers, but it's also, you know, the construction and the demolition workers. They're heavily exposed to asbestos dust. Then this is, I got it from the IBAN, and Sri Lanka banned in 1987. The Clissolite was banned. But then I'm just stating facts. I have nothing against any country. I'm just stating what was in the news in Sri Lanka. So this is what happened in Sri Lanka in September 2016. The government, the mass media minister, you know, gave a press conference and said that asbestos was going to be banned from 2018. A partial ban, a restricted ban, and then from 2024, this year, it was going to be a complete ban. So this was in September 2016, and then in December 2017, Russia restricts tea supplies from Sri Lanka after finding a beetle. And we have been exporting tea for many, many, many decades, and not once has any country complained of any kind of this kind of issue. Then the plantation minister in, you know, these are just facts, in December 2017 said that cabinet is lifting the ban on usage of white asbestos for state, they say state institutions, but they lifted the ban for everywhere. And, you know, so then the media is questioning whether the lifting of the ban is linked to the Russia's tea import ban. And so this is on the 20th of December, cabinet lifts the ban. On the 26th of December, same year, Russia lifts the tea import ban. So are they linked? It's up to you to decide. So these are just, this is out on the net. This is easily accessible to anybody. So then Central Environmental Authority claims that asbestos is toxic in their articles, in their publications, and then the Sri Lankan health system, you know, they have sent out guidelines on how to get rid of asbestos during demolition, how to, you know, guidelines of removing asbestos cement sheets from buildings. So if the health ministry does not think that it's hazardous, why are they setting out all these guidelines? That is a question to be answered. So even the asbestos industry, like Dr. Gopal said, you know, we used to call it asbestos roofing sheets, but now we call it corrugated cement roofing sheets. So why did they, if they think that asbestos is not dangerous, why have they removed the name of asbestos there? I'm just going through things quickly. So these are all local big newspapers, and they said that, you know, in 2020, the government said that schools in new constructions, they will not be using asbestos products. But to date, we see even in schools, piles of asbestos roofing sheets are being used. So certain rules come and go, but they're not implemented properly. You know, so the absence, Sri Lanka, the main problem with Sri Lanka is that we don't have much data. So people think that absence of data, you know, there's absence of disease. So this is a big argument because not sufficient research is done, and whatever the research is done, you know, asbestos lobbyists are also sponsoring them. So there's a catch-22, you know, are these things with facts. So if I talk about the epidemiological status in asbestos health-related issues, you know, we don't have an occupational health surveillance system in Sri Lanka. We don't have occupational health guidelines. So there's no statistics on occupational exposures. And then, you know, the medical files, are they being locked away? There was a question on that at these asbestos manufacturing plants. The actual data coming out, then some of these studies are linked to the lobbies. Majority of these studies are linked to the lobbies, and underreporting occurs mainly because there's people don't know the danger, or people don't actually understand the danger because we don't have data and incomplete investigation procedures, and we don't have a proper recording or registering of asbestos-related cases. And also, occupational health is not very much understood, let alone asbestos-related diseases among the medical profession. So occupational history is hardly taken by the doctors, so they don't know. They just treat whatever the lung or whatever the case that they get, but there's no digging deep into the occupational aspect of it. Then the challenges of clinical diagnosis, because the radiologists and the pulmonologists might not be so experienced. Then, they think because the lack of exposure histories, they may identify it as something else. They may overlook, they may only think that asbestos causes lung pleura-related problems, but there are many other cancers it causes, and people may, even the doctors may not be very much aware of those things. Then since, we have quite a bit of TB, so it might get misdiagnosed as TB. Then sometimes, because the pleural plaques also, if it is unilateral, what would they do? Would they consider it as asbestos, or would they think that there's a relevancy? Then calcifications, all those things, would they link it with the relevancy? So these are all issues because lack of occupational history taking. Then adenocarcinomas, it can also be misdiagnosed as adenocarcinomas. I'll show you some of the data there. Here, this is age-specific incidence rates and the cancer registry of Sri Lanka in 2021. And I've highlighted here among men that there have been 13 mesotheliomas found, and among women, there are 5 mesotheliomas found. So, and then in 2015, before we go into that, so in the respiratory tract, respiratory system, males, there are cancers among 1,500 males and 500 females, and there's quite a lot. So we have about 13 and 5 of mesotheliomas, but there are quite a lot of adenocarcinomas and other carcinomas undiagnosed. The nature of origin is not known. So are they mesotheliomas? That is the other question we need to ask. And then in 2015, the mesothelioma among men was 8, and among women it hasn't changed at all. So there have been a few cases where the unions have supported mesothelioma victims to go into litigation and get some kind of compensation, or go into the legal system, but people withdraw and they get whatever little payment that, because they think that it's a long, arduous task to get into the legal system, because our Justice Minister a few years ago himself, acknowledged that we have problems with our legal system. So, let me leave all of you with this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Assini. These are difficult challenges. But the next section, I will be talking about potential solutions. So hopefully that will help. So, Dr. Takala, you're going to lead the session. You are muted. You want to introduce the next moderator?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for this particular session. So the next point what we have on the agenda is a particular group of speakers moderated by Jason Hodges, and I will just briefly introduce him. Jason is a chartered scientist, a chartered environmentalist and assessor. He holds the postgraduate diploma in occupational hygiene from Manchester University. Jason has worked in the environmental occupational hygiene consultancy for over 32 years. specializing in the field of asbestos, in which he is often engaged as an expert witness. Between 2013 and 18, Jason was the BOHS East Anglian regional organizer, and between 2018 and 21 served on the BOHS faculty committee. Jason has been on the BOHS International Engagement Group since May 23. He's a trustee of the UK branch of Workplace Health Without Borders and recently stepped into the role of honorary treasurer of BOHS. Can you also explain what is BOHS? I could easily read its basic occupational health services, but maybe something different. And please also keep the timetable and the timetable for all the rest of the speakers so that we can finish in time scheduled for this. Jason, you have the floor.
Yeah. Thank you, Jukka. Yeah, the BOHS is the British Occupational Hygiene Society. It's one of the third oldest hygiene societies in the world. In the interest of time, I'm going to briefly do the biographies of our distinguished speakers, and we'll just do them just prior to their speaking. I know we said 10 minutes, Jonathan, but if you could sort of keep it down to 7 or 8, that would be fantastic. Thank you. So Jonathan started his career in 1995, local government scientific services. Completed a master's in environmental management. He's been a senior lecturer at the University of Portsmouth, delivering occupational health management masters. And for the last 19 years, he's had his own. He's been the CEO of Howard Gully Associate. Howard Gully. He'll correct me in a minute. Anyway, Jonathan's a registrar of the Faculty of Asbestos Assessment and Management, which is part of BOHS, and sits on the board of trustees for BOHS. Jonathan.
Okay. Thanks very much, Jason. And also, I just really want to start by saying thanks so much for being invited to speak. And I really think what Workplace Health Without Borders does is such a fantastic thing, and it's an amazing community to have all these people together. And I'd just like to thank the previous presenters, because I feel I'm learning an awful lot today, and it's only by coming together like this that we can really make a difference and hopefully move forward. So what I'm going to do is very, very quickly give you an overview of asbestos in the UK, the past and the present. So I'm going to start with a very, very quick history lesson before bringing us right back up to date, say where we are today. And I think the message is going to be, part of it is, once you've banned asbestos, that the problems don't stop there. In a kind of the problems continue. What do you do from that point on? And we'll have a think about as well. Talking about it being a community, I think we're pretty good scientifically and technically. I think we're excellent, but is asbestos a political issue? And I think it absolutely is. And I think that's one of the areas that we all across the world need to get better at, playing the political game and having the political impact, which is why one of the reasons why I think what we're doing today is so fantastic. So here we go. The history of asbestos in the UK, and the spoiler alert is, yes, we have banned asbestos, and we did kind of finally ban it in 1999. And I say finally ban it because this very, very brief history lesson is going to show that we've known about it for an awful long time. And actually, when you look at it, it's astonishing it took so long to ban it. But now we have banned it. Just asking a question, everything is obviously completely fine. And we'll come back to that. So to start us off, how long have we known about the health effects of asbestos in the UK? Well, we can take you back over 100 years, actually, to Dr. Murray in 1906. So, we are going back quite a long time here, where he did a report after some guys working in a factory presented with bronchitis. And, we're thinking, well, maybe it isn't bronchitis, it's something to do with what they're doing. Going back again, this is 100 years actually. From March this year, Nellie Kershaw was the first ever recorded case of asbestosis. So you see, we're going quite a long way back about when we first really knew what was going on. So we accepted that was a fact, that these people were dying from diseases related to asbestos. So clearly we implemented the legislation immediately. Well, absolutely, not at all. No. Remember going back to this date, and for a whole period of time, There are people lobbying to say that there's nothing wrong with asbestos at all. The very, very brief timeline of history of asbestos legislation in the UK. The first bit really was 1931 asbestos industry regulations. Now, this is not protecting anyone out there or banning asbestos, recognizing that there are people dying in factories, and this was a little bit to do about trying to protect them. We also had Factory Acts, which it did essentially the same job. And then 1974, very wide-reaching legislation to do with health and safety at work. It came into force, but not really specific to do with asbestos. So we really started to ban asbestos in the UK from 1985, where the first bit of asbestos prohibition regulation. There were actually some voluntary bans prior to that as well, but this prohibited the import of blue and brown asbestos. So at this stage, effectively, it's kind of the insulating board and the sprayed materials were banned. So these dates, if you're an asbestos surveyor in the UK, are really important, actually, because when you go to do a survey of a building, you can kind of tell what product type is likely to be there, depending on the date of it, based on when different things were banned. And then in 1988, there was some amendment regulations that added a couple more things. And then 1992, all amphiboles were banned, and then certain chrysotile products were banned as well. So an important one for us in the UK is textured decorative coatings, because there's an awful lot of those materials around. And then moving on, finally, we get to 1999, and there's a ban on white asbestos. So this really meant, you know, the asbestos cement sheets were finally banned. There was a couple of clauses in that. But what does this mean? So we banned it 24, 25 years ago. So presumably everything's okay now. Well, we'll have a little look at that. So asbestos is brilliant, isn't it? Well, I think we in the UK certainly thought it was, because we just could not get enough of this stuff. I think, mentioned in Vietnam, 1.5 million tons. Well, it's not top tons, but I think we went more than that, and we think about 6 million tons of asbestos have been imported in the UK. And the chart there shows the graph of the imports, and the different colours are the blue and the brown, and then the larger peaks there are the white. And you can see over the period of time dating from the 1900s to peaking in the 70s. And also, it's asbestos as well. How many tons does it relate to of actually asbestos products? So, we also have nowadays how many buildings contain asbestos. So the problem is once you have banned it and you've got 6 million tons of it, and then millions and millions and millions of products, what do you do then? So the problem doesn't go away. How do you manage the asbestos that is in existing buildings? Well, again, you come up with, hopefully, if your government comes up with a bunch of regulations to do with the control of asbestos once it's in buildings and it's protecting workers. But you can see, as I'm going through this, talking about workers a lot, but it's also incidental building users that can be affected as well. And I don't even think we're touching on that properly yet. And I don't think we yet understand about low-level, long-term exposures for individuals just using buildings that contain asbestos. So I could spend all day talking about the intricacies of this legislation here, but it's essentially around safely removing asbestos and also requiring to know where it is in a building. So in the 2002 regulations, there was this duty to manage asbestos in non-domestic premises. So effectively, that really meant that you needed to do a survey if it's a non-domestic premises to find out what asbestos is present, and if it is present, adequately manage it. So that's a really, really bit of important legislation. But then we get to the question is that been working really well in the UK? And I think that's a difficult question to answer, because I think in the UK, everyone presumes that it's a problem that's gone away, and everyone who you speak to who is a layperson just thinks there isn't a problem with asbestos anymore. Well, I'm not so sure about that. So you say with all this excellent legislation, everything must be fine. Well, it's not at the moment, no. We have over 5,000 asbestos-related deaths per year in the UK, which is one of the highest in incident rates of asbestos disease in the world. And we have one of the highest mesothelioma death rates in the world as well, because we've got this legacy of it. So this graph here is showing the mesothelioma death. It's HSE data, but obviously where we are now in this graph here relates to historic exposures happening. And all of the data that the HSE in the UK are presenting is the exposures, the death rate going down. But it kind of feels to me, when you go back and you look at all the historic data, the peak seems to be nudging further and further forward. So I think we need to question that at every point as well. So how many buildings in the UK do contain asbestos? And there's various sources of information. And really what I'm going to say is, I don't know with any confidence, and I'm not sure anyone knows with any confidence how many buildings in the UK contain asbestos. There's various HSE statistics, some of them contradictory. There are other reports saying different numbers. But I would say the 1.5 million one is much more likely to be accurate than some of the other numbers there. We used it so much, we couldn't get enough of this stuff, and we built it, we put it into everything. Again, just a fairly recent report from 2022, ATAC and NORAC, they got a load of survey information from various organizations. There was 128 buildings inspected in this, and the data pulled together, ended up with 1 million lines of data. And what they found was 78% of the buildings that were surveyed contained asbestos, and a lot of these were houses. So if you think 78% of that, that was surveyed contained asbestos, and then work out there are 21 million pre-2000 dwellings in the UK, you can do a little simple sum there and go, hey, maybe there's an awful lot of buildings in the UK with asbestos. And the other thing, when I mentioned, was that kind of duty to manage and everything should be working out fine. Well, in this survey data, there was 700,000 bits of asbestos found. So, that might be a ceiling tile or a roof or whatever it was. And 71% of them were found to have some level of damage. Now, this doesn't directly relate to anyone being exposed, but clearly there's a potential exposure. And that's a shocking number in my view. So bringing us right back up to date, well, relatively up to date in terms of the legislation in the UK and where we are and what we're doing and how we're moving things forward. Well, about 8 years ago now, we did a thing called Brexit, which is we decided we didn't like our European neighbours for some reason. I love them all, but for some reason we said we don't want to be with you anymore, and we'll have a little divorce. So any legislation in the UK that was EU derived was affected by something they called the EU retained EU law bill. And what this meant in 2022, that we were in a position where the asbestos, if nothing had changed, the asbestos regulations would have been deleted from the UK statute book, which I tell this to people and they don't believe me, but that's factually where we are. But now the EU law bill is now an act. So the legislation is kind of in this limbo state where it's difficult to make any changes. So we're in a funny position, and I don't think really there was any ever danger of the asbestos regulations being deleted, but I think it's just that we have to keep fighting all the time. The fight never stops. We've got to keep being active and make our politicians listen to what we see is going on. Yeah, the last couple of things to finish. Really recently, there was a review in the UK Parliament of the Health and Safety Executive's approach to asbestos management. There was a whole bunch of recommendations that were put there. And what interests me from this is what actually was effectively rejected by the government. And the two things that were rejected was the development of a central register of asbestos and also a national strategy for asbestos removal, which essentially they say just can't be done, and all sorts of excuses. But you go to other countries around the world and some of these things are being implemented. So really what I'm getting to was we're actually having a bit of a divergence slightly from the rest of Europe, who seem to be progressing things in a slightly different way. And just an example of that, there's a lowering of the occupational exposure limits in the rest of Europe, but not in the UK, and the mandating of electron microscopy, which again is not something that's going to be happening in the UK. So there is a bit of a divergence. And this has all come from a new EU directive that now the UK won't be implementing. But I think from this, what I really thought was brilliant as well is the need to work. The EU is stated in their legislation, their primary legislation, that they need to work with other organisations to achieve a global ban on asbestos. And I firmly believe this is what the UK could be working with, and it's one of the reasons why I think this forum is so fantastic. But I think we probably all know the problems ourselves, and it's how do we communicate that better to the outside world. And I think some of the work that's been done by Workplace Health Without Borders is so fantastic. Very last slide here. Just to summarize really quickly, the problem does not go away once asbestos is being banned. We need to keep banning it. And by that, I mean we need to keep fighting. And the legacy of existing asbestos, once you have banned it, needs to be managed. And that management needs to go on and on for a long time into the future. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. Sorry to rush you through your slides there. We're going to go straight on. There'll be some roundtable at the end, but we're going straight on to Kevin Hedges, who's a past president of Workplace Health Without Borders International. Dr. Hedges is a certified occupational hygienist, fellow of the Australian Institute of Occupational Hygienists, and has worked as a regulator in Australia and Canada, and now is professionally employed by the Occupational Health Clinics for Ontario Workers, Inc. Kevin, if you could just get straight onto it, that'd be great. If I could sort of limit you again, sort of 7 minutes, that'd be great. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. It gives me great pleasure just to give a snapshot of the Australian situation. This is the fourth asbestos webinar, and Alec asked for a title, and I came up with Australia, a national strategy to eradicate asbestos exposure for workers, their families, and communities, aligned with international efforts towards a worldwide ban. And if we think about the strategic framework for Workplace Health Without Borders, this is our strategic framework, which was revised in 2021. Our vision, we do think about workers, their families, and communities as well in our vision. They're the questions that were posed because of time, I won't go through each of them, but this is kind of covering all the questions in the brochure that was sent out. There's a very good, if you go to the Australian website, the Australian Government Asbestos and Silica Safety and Eradication Agency, you can actually track the history of asbestos in Australia. So, you know, there was a total ban in 2003. However, the problem is Australia continues to deal with a substantial asbestos legacy. The material was mined for over 100 years, with production only ceasing in 1983. So, you know, Priscilla-like blue asbestos consumption ceased in the late 1960s, followed by brown asbestos, amosite, mid-1980s. And then, you know, despite significant government reports being published in 1990 and 1999, it was not until the end of 2003 that a complete ban of all forms of asbestos. So that's quite some time ago where there was a complete ban. So there was a phase-out approach, and Victoria led the way. They kind of provided this report and recommended, you know, the ban in Australia back in 1990. But really it was a sustained efforts of trade unions and non-governmental organisations who are essential in forcing the Australian government to finally implement the 2003 asbestos ban. Here we are in, you know, 2024, and, you know, Australia is very good at providing information through their government website on the numbers of cases, for example, of mesothelioma in Australia. So you can just look at the numbers of cases of mesothelioma there. But the problem is, as you know, other speakers have alluded to, even with the ban, like in 2003, Australia has a huge legacy problem. And, you know, looking at where asbestos is in Australia, you know, look at the cement sheeting, residential, commercial, and cement in water pipes. You know, Australia has the highest rates of mesothelioma and other asbestos-related diseases in the world due to the country's past heavy use of asbestos. And they continue to deal with the asbestos legacy. It's been projected that there will be approximately 19,400 new cases of mesothelioma diagnosed in Australia before the end of the century. I've just got a picture there of Dr. Kent Takahashi, who presented at ICO 2024 in Morocco. At that time, he was professor, or back in 2000, quite a few years ago, he was the professor and director of the Asbestos Diseases Research Institute. So if you think about where we are now with the estimated stocks of asbestos, there's still a lot of asbestos out there, and the tail it's going to take a long time to get rid of all the asbestos. So the current estimates indicate that probably 6.2 million tons of legacy asbestos remaining in the built environment. But really, campaigns from the manufacturing unions led to asbestos ban policy changes, particularly the complete ban of asbestos in 2003. But I guess the exciting thing is more recent developments, such as the establishment of the world's first National Asbestos Safety and Eradication Agency. And actually, they've just been renamed to the Australian Government Asbestos and Silica Safety and Eradication Agency. You know, really helps set the way. There's been a lot of campaign work, and here's a link to a campaign site that people can look at. So campaign's been a big part of the process. There is now a National Asbestos Exposure Register, and there's also Asbestos National Strategic Plan. And as I said, this is through the Asbestos and Silica Safety and Eradication Agency. But if you look at the plan, the aim is towards, like, you know, thinking of the end in mind, the forward state, facilitate Australia's international role in leading the campaign for a worldwide asbestos ban. You know, for many years, Australia have required that there be an inventory for asbestos containing material in buildings. And from memory, I think it's Victoria, they led the way. And now I just see that they provided guidance through Safe Work Australia, which is a national body to provide, you know, harmonisation for all of the different states. There's an asbestos guidance material for asbestos registers at the workplace, and the Asbestos and Silica Safety Eradication Agency have some really good material here on how to assess the risk of the material, like looking at the friability, the condition, and the potential for disturbance. And just you know, what was very made obvious to me at ICO 24 was when Professor Ken Takahashi talked about ADDIRI and the EAT toolkit for the elimination of asbestos-related diseases in developing countries. Apparently, it's being revised, and I've been speaking to Shane McArdle, who's the manager of international projects, about the way forward here. That's my presentation.
That's fantastic.
Thank you very much. Back to you, Jason.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. That was pretty much 7 minutes exactly. So I'll introduce Dr. Alessandro Marinaccio, or anywhere close. Anyway, he's head of the Unit of Occupational and Environmental Epidemiology in the Italian National Workers' Compensation Authority and director of the Italian National Mesothelioma Registry. Dr. Marinaccio.
Okay, hi, thank you. It's a pleasure for me to contribute to this webinar. My presentation will regard the Italian part. toward the national asbestos ban in 1992, and also the policies after the asbestos ban, with a special focus on the role of the epidemiological surveillance of mesothelioma incident cases and the analysis of exposure in patients as a crucial key for the prevention of the disease and for the identification of unknown source of contamination. But first of all, I want to start with an annotation about the relationship between research findings and policies. This is a clear picture of the difficulties in the translation of the epidemiological findings into the practice and to the policies. As you know, in the period between 1955 and 1965, the health effect of asbestos exposure at the workplaces, but also in the environment, have been definitively demonstrated. But as you can see, the asbestos consumption trend is increasing in the world for many times. So this is a clear picture of the difficulties to translate scientific findings to the policies. But what happened in Italy? Asbestos mining was an important industrial activity in northern Italy. Balangero quarry in Piedmont, northern Italy, western northern Italy, was the largest chrysotile quarry until 1985. And at the same time, Eternit company started producing asbestos in Casale Monferrato with a huge amount of employees and a large environmental contamination. So asbestos has been used in Italy, in my country, largely in shipyards, railway construction, and the coibentation, textile industry, and many others activity. Here you can see the amount of asbestos consumption in my country, more than 3 million tons of raw asbestos. And it is remarkable that an important part of this asbestos consumption regards crocidolite imported from Australia and South Africa. I like very much this graph because it's a clear representation about the importance to study the asbestos consumption in the past in the country with asbestos ban, that have banned asbestos, but also in the country without asbestos ban, because this graph and many epidemiological studies have demonstrated that there is a clear correlation, almost linear correlation between asbestos consumption in the past and asbestos-related disease, but in particular mortality from pleural and extrapleural mesothelioma after an adequate latency period. Because this is very important, because in many countries with still currently huge asbestos consumption, there are no surveillance systems of mesothelioma incidence and also mesothelioma mortality, and this is a great difficulty for a correct debate about the cost and the benefit of an international asbestos ban. So this is in particular the situation in my country. Here you can see the forecast of mesothelioma mortality. And also in this study, you can see the connection between asbestos consumption in the past and epidemic curve of mesothelioma. But what was the path in Italy toward the asbestos ban in 1992? The origin of this story is the town of Casale Monferrato, with a clear outbreak of mesothelioma due to the presence of a great asbestos cement plant, an Eternit plant. So what happened? That a first epidemiological study was being published in 1985 with a clear demonstration of an epidemic curve of mesothelioma in this country. So the mayor of the city take the decision to close the plant for the evidence of emergency in public health situation. After a great debate between the association of victims, the trade union, the employee, the firm management. So this decision was very important and was the starting point toward the asbestos ban, the national asbestos ban in my country. After the asbestos ban, the key point of debate were the asbestos substitutes materials, the air surveillance program for next exposed, and the policies and resources for asbestos removal activities. But I want to highlight in particular the role of the epidemiological surveillance of mesothelioma cases after the ban, but also before the ban, the importance before the ban for countries that have not banned, still not banned asbestos. Try to present something about the Italian experience. In Italy, there is a complete surveillance system for incidence mesothelioma cases that cover all the national territory, with a role of each region in the active search of mesothelioma cases and in the reconstruction of the modality of asbestos exposure for each patient with an individual anamnestic questionnaire. I want to say that this tool is crucial. And this is a story, the story of Biancavilla is a clear representation of the importance of the epidemiological surveillance of mesothelioma cases, in particular incident cases. Because in this little town in Sicily, the epidemiological surveillance allow to understand the reasons of a cluster of mesothelioma unexplained with relation to the industrial context, because in this region there was any industrial use of asbestos, any no industrial or environmental contamination. This story allow to understand the presence of fluoredenite in this town with health effect very similar to asbestos. The epidemiological surveillance of mesothelioma incident cases have allowed furthermore to identify a large spectrum of non-traditional, unknown, unexpected, and surprising source of asbestos contamination. And I think that this is a crucial point to understand what we can do for promoting the prevention of asbestos exposure for workers, but also for all the collectivity, and to support the activity of insurance public system. As you can see, the presence of asbestos in the theater, in wine and coffee shop, plant, and so on, is something that we can demonstrate only on the basis of the epidemiological surveillance of incident cases and of the reconstruction of modality of exposure for each patient. Some other example of these, you can see the non-asbestos textile sector with the demonstration of asbestos presence in brake system due to the epidemiological surveillance. The evidence of cluster of mesothelioma in hairdressers with cluster in Casale Monferrato, but not also in Casale Monferrato. The presence of asbestos in curtains, scenography building, and so on, with the evidence of cluster of mesothelioma in the workers involved in this activity. And I want to to say something very briefly about the possibility for the Italian Mesothelioma Registry to demonstrate that the association between pericardial and tunica vaginale testis mesothelioma with the exposure to asbestos. You know that also Jarke in his monography talk ever of pleura and peritoneal mesothelioma, but the pericardial and the testis disease is so rare that it's difficult to say something of definite. This is the demonstration that the epidemiological surveillance can support, can produce evidence also about this disease. This is the prediction of Serikov about the 3 wave in the mesothelioma cases. In substance, and we can say that was a very important and very well done prediction, see the actual condition in Italy. I think the international collaboration is very important, and this webinar is a proof of this. You can see the guideline of Italy translated in Portuguese recently, and I have finished. I think that I agree that the most efficient way to eliminate asbestos-related disease is to stop using all type of asbestos, and as Michael Marmot says many times, if no data, no problem, and no problem, no action. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Alessandro. Thank you very much. We'll just rush straight on to our next speaker, which is Sophia Kisting-Cairncross. Again, apologies on getting that wrong. She's an occupational medicine specialist and adjunct professor of occupational medicine division at the School of Public Health at the University of Cape Town. Just a couple of awards. As 2017, the University of Cape Town awarded the Presidents of Convocational Medal recognition for having made a significant contribution to the common good. And in 2019, the American Public Health Association awarded the Leslie Nichols International Award for Global Achievements in Work Health and Safety. Sophia, thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and it's really a great pleasure to be part of this gathering. So I am traveling, so I'm speaking to you from a hotel room in Johannesburg. So I hope that I will be able to continue with my talk. So I was touched by 2 things that the Honorary Bob Rae had to say, and of course Jukka's introduction, and that was that we have to speak the truth. We have to find ways to speak the truth, and I would say we have to find ways to speak the truth to power, and also that we have to look at the science. I think those 2 things are important for me. So the South African story towards the banning of asbestos in 2008, it's a journey of which I was very, very much an integral part, and sort of can speak about that with great confidence. And I can also say at the outset that the journey towards a ban, it's a long road towards asbestos freedom or a ban. But as one of the previous speakers so clearly indicated, I think it was a colleague from the UK, or I may be mistaken, but certainly once you have banned asbestos, then you continue to have to find ways to ensure that you reduce the impact of the asbestos that's already in place. Otherwise, the problem just continue. So I am saying this right at the outset because I think that a measure of activism and of awareness and continuous agitation is very, very, very much needed for it. So South Africa started to mine asbestos really at the end of the 19th century, so more than 100 years, well, more than a century. Asbestos was mined, and we mined all 3 of the main commercial types of asbestos, croxidolite, amosite, and chrysotile, and the bulk of it was actually exported, but a lot was used locally for asbestos cement products and many other uses in the country. We found that by about 1970s, we were producing about 400,000 metric tons of asbestos, and then there was sort of a gradual decline because I think mainly because the international demand for asbestos declined. But how did we get to an asbestos ban? There are many factors, and I think we were very fortunate in the time that it happened. Part of it is really the strength of the South African trade unions in the 80s, 1980s, focusing very much on occupational health and safety. Because we mined croxidolite in the blue asbestos belt in the Northern Cape Province. We had a very high incidence of mesothelioma. And we were fortunate in that we had people who studied and wrote about it. And there was a 1984 paper who certainly looked at stevedores in the Cape Town harbour, from which asbestos was exported to other countries, certainly to Europe. And there were many of the workers there who certainly had asbestosis and some who developed mesothelioma. So that helped somewhat the trade unions to work on it. And then we also had some very important court cases that highlighted the outcomes of asbestos. But we were fortunate in the 1990s with our freedom and our new democratic government. We had an asbestos summit in our parliament in 1998 when President Mandela was still president of the country. And I think that tide of optimism and of wanting to make a change and have a redress and compensation and so on helped us towards the ban in 2008. We certainly had, through the parliament, organized an asbestos summit that was very extensively attended by community members, and that is very important. Communities who were affected by the asbestos, not just in the built environment, but the asbestos that was left behind by at least 245 asbestos mines scattered around the country, and many mine dumps that certainly were more than the mines that were there, and the problems communities were experiencing as a result of that asbestos. So I was looking at the legislation in the UK, and I suppose to a certain extent we followed a similar pattern in 2002. We certainly updated our asbestos regulations for much better surveillance, etc., etc. And in 2007, we passed through actually our Department of Environmental Affairs in collaboration with the Department of Labour and the Department of Mining. We publish the asbestos regulations, that the prohibition of the use of asbestos, which was a major victory for our people. And really, it has to be an inclusive process. You have to involve as many actors as you can, and you need to find a way to find international collaboration. We were greatly helped by international support. And I want to mention one person who certainly wrote a book on asbestos called Asbestos Blues. He was a son of Australia, Professor Jukka Takala. And that kind of information, that scientific information, accurate historic information rather, was of great help within all that. Now, since then, we have a lot of asbestos in place because of our apartheid past. Asbestos was very much used in housing for poorer communities. So if you go to a massive area here near Johannesburg, Soweto, or many of our township areas in our country, which is sort of a legacy of our apartheid past, you will find that there are many homes, schools, preschool centers where the roofs, the ceilings, the gutters are of asbestos. And we are fortunate in having an asbestos laboratory that measures asbestos fibers in our National Institute for Occupational Health here in Johannesburg. And certainly that sort of approach of measuring asbestos using the electron microscope and so on help us to keep track of exposure. But of course, it's not universally applied. We are meant from the asbestos regulations of 2020, the asbestos abatement regulation of 2020, to have an inventory, to have a risk assessment, and so on, and how to regulate the asbestos contractors. So all those things are in place legislatively, but practically, of course, we are struggling because, like many other countries, there are many competing priorities and so on. So you have to find a way to continue to put the issues of asbestos right up front and find a way to agitate. And one of those is through the utilization, certainly the epidemiological approach and certainly the research approach. I think that is very important. I want to just make a few points from our experience, and that is, it is critically important, certainly in our context, to support affected communities for them to continue to have a voice, because many of them are in distant rural areas, and unless they have asbestos, like the asbestos interest group and so on to support them, they cannot really agitate all by themselves. Awareness raising and so on at a public level, and that can be done once again, I think, kept alive through research, through publication of papers, through engagement with workers. The occupational health side remain critically important to keep the issue of asbestos alive, because so often it is seen as yesterday's disease. And to keep on training doctors and nurses to diagnose it accurately, because mesothelioma often, even though we are the country that definitively demonstrated in the 1960s with Dr. Wagner's and Sleg's study that there is a definitive link between asbestos exposure and mesothelioma, even though we have got that kind of research, there is still not enough research done all the time. So education, training and advocacy, the accurate diagnosis, training of doctors, and the colleague of Sri Lanka spoke a bit about that challenge. The importance of the court cases, including a court case in the UK, and international collaboration. I mentioned that, awareness of what is happening in IARC, and events such as this, where we share information, where we can advocate for change, and where we can actually also really find a way to understand each other's challenges better. So I thank you very, very much. And certainly I hope that we will find a way forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sophia. I know you prepared 10 minutes, and that was just about 10 minutes. That was fantastic. Thank you. I didn't want to interrupt your flow because it's very important what you're saying. I think it's very difficult, the challenges we're facing. Just as for instance, last year, Russia and Kazakhstan combined figures, they employ 400,000 people in the asbestos mining industry, and it was worth to their economy about $880 billion. So they're not going to give it up lightly, and obviously, not being a democracy like South Africa, the pressures that you can put on government is quite limited. Anyway, thank you very much. That's part of our section finished. I'll hand back to you, Jukka.
Thank you very much. I think we have been talking now. We are clearly quite late from the program, so we have been talking with Alec or communicating with Alec on what to do next. Alec, can you interfere with your comments at this point?
So thank you, everyone. I'm not worried about us going over time. This has been a marvelous dialogue. I thank all the presenters. I think serious issues have been placed on the table, and the challenges faced in the country still using asbestos are obviously so significant. And some of these solutions I hope are helpful. We had planned to have a round table actually from 9:45 to 10:15 and then a closing by Jukka. But actually Jukka has a very significant presentation. So my proposal to the group, and I think it's workable, it's worked before, is that we go straight to Jukka now. He will strive to finish before 10:30, and then we will start a roundtable which will extend past 10:30. Hopefully, quite a few people will be able to stay. We understand if some have to leave at 9:30, pardon me, at 10:30 Eastern Time. We still have almost 200 people on this webinar. So I think that might work better than going into a roundtable and then people not getting the benefit of Jukka's closing remarks. So if it's all right, Jukka, I'd say take over, make your presentation, and try to gather all the strands of this discussion for a proposal on the way forward. And then I will moderate a discussion session afterwards. And I think what we'll do in that session is we'll start right off with the 3 presenters from countries still using asbestos with some of their thoughts with everything they've heard, and then there'll be a general discussion. So Jukka, take over, and we're very, very interested in what you have to say with your vast experience.
Okay, this would be fine for me. I'm still have the microphone on. Yes, can you hear me? So no, what I would do in this case that I will have a short introduction, then exactly we follow the idea of what Alec was proposing here, that we have the further discussion right after my presentation. That would fit also nicely because some of the ideas are coming up. One more question before I start is that could we also have the PowerPoint presentation if colleagues who have done that, if they would agree to share those? So if you are happy to sharing your own contribution, I would be happy to receive them or get them from Alec and the colleagues of the workplace health and well-being and so on. So
we'll share everything, Jukka. We'll share the presentations, and there will be a recording of the event. All of it will be made available after the session.
Okay.
No one should worry at all.
Okay, so then I go to my presentation. I do have an international experience on this, starting from the International Labour Organization in different countries. I've been working myself in 6 countries in the world and visiting practically all countries in the world under the International Labour Organization. So this is something what is based on my experience and what is important and what can be done in terms of abatement of asbestos-related problem. Number one, based on the discussion already here, the legacy of asbestos, those who still continue to use asbestos, the legacy is obviously more than 50 years because the latency time of being exposed to finally getting the asbestos-related disease. But not only that, the second and even maybe bigger legacy is that asbestos is now infrastructure for much, much longer period of time. And I have some comments exactly based on that. So my summary is more or less here that let's look at the disease trends now and in the future, then looking at the long-term problems between 20 and 55 years long latency, but also the burden of underestimation. And then measures to be taken, ban asbestos, but also a removal process and exposure limits and asbestos in existing infrastructure. And I have some arguments particularly in that direction. 1 second, I move this picture out from here so I can see. So we can see that the asbestos-related cancers and asbestos-related other diseases, they are already relatively cautious, based on relatively cautious estimates, 239,000. But our, including myself, I talk about ours, it's number of people from the International Commission of Occupational Health, my own university, and so on. We just established a new paper, and that refers also to asbestos and quite strongly. and come to those figures. So it may not be just 239,000. Particularly the reason is that there are a lot of things that are underreported. And several people mentioned already here that together with our team, including Ken Takahashi, Sujio Furia, who is also in part of the listeners today, we made a study showing that there are a number of missing things that we have never identified. And those are particularly linked to the mesothelioma numbers, and the mesothelioma numbers are much bigger than what we have expected, what we have seen in the statistics of WHO and even the global burden of disease. So, and once mesothelioma numbers are bigger, then also the other asbestos diseases are bigger. Why? If there's mesothelioma, there's exposure to asbestos. And once there's exposure to asbestos, all the other problems follow. So it's not that they are linked to mesothelioma, but they are linked to the exposure itself. And this is the problem, but is not always identified. And we have identified that there are significantly more mesothelioma. Our calculation at work, it was 36,000 rather than 27,000 now reported by GBD. And if we count that, then the figures are much bigger. And my figures and our figures are here at work. It could be 289,000. And if you count all non-work or semi-occupational things, comes to more than 300,000. And one more thing, but it's not here either, is the long-term exposure in the infrastructure itself. Coming to that. So we proposed, Sujio, myself and others, we proposed a limit to be 0.001 per fibers per cubic centimeter or milliliter. Now, how much is that? If you look at cubic meter, that is 1 million milliliters. So the limit here would be 1,000 fibers per cubic meter. And a cubic meter you inhale more or less in an hour. That's meter by meter. And in that if you have 1,000 fibers in that cubic meter, you inhale that in an hour. Of course, most of it comes out, but that means that everyone who is exposed to this, and practically the whole world is exposed, including also the people who are not heavily exposed, means are exposed. And that means suddenly we have huge number of relatively low exposure. Low exposure meaning 1,000 fibers. The European Parliament, and they agreed on this 1,000 fibers per cubic meter, not cubic milliliter. And they proposed that to be set up as a limit. Now, finally, bargaining between member states and the European Parliament and the European Commission, the outcome was 2,000 rather than 1,000. So that means 0.002, 2,000 fibers per cubic meter, and fairly lengthy time for getting that into practice. So that means that the legacy is still continuing for a while, even in Europe, where there will be strict limits of 2,000 fibers or 0.002 fibers per cubic centimeter. So finally, we think that there could be close to 300,000 asbestos caused fatalities, including the asbestosis itself, which is not cancer anymore. If we look at the numbers, they go up everywhere in the world. And I think European data is exactly the same thing as practically everywhere else in the world. But one thing what is really important, Sweden, which banned asbestos 40 years ago, exactly 40 years, 1984 or so. So they have now, if you look at the Swedish numbers, they started to go down until the year of 2000, 2005, but then started to go up. So, for example, Stockholm, which is highly populated and also a place where there's a lot of demolition and things like that, building new buildings, they have clearly rising trend from 2005 until today, and it appears that it will continue. So that means that while the heavy exposure in the 1970s in Europe has been stopped in the countries that banned early, like Sweden, the infrastructure is creating this additional problem over there, and it goes now. It's higher today than it used to be in the 1990s already, and it may continue to be higher every year at that. Of course, you can see that the younger cohorts, they seem to be having better outcomes, so people don't die young anymore. But also the life expectancy is going up, so that means that people are not anymore living 60, 70 years. They may live 80, 90 years, and that ends up having more and more people. And that ends up in the long exposure time from 1970s until today, and that continues. So even smaller numbers. So if you have 100 times lower exposure, but you have 100 times higher number of exposed, it will bring the same problem. So this is visible from Sweden, and I think it's important thing to keep in mind. So I think this more or less what I wanted to say here, and what can we do in better than in the past. And this exposure limit is one, but keep in mind the asbestos in infrastructure. If you don't do anything on that, it will still cause problem, and it will cause much bigger problem once you start demolishing and start repairing and starting reconstruction and things like that. So I think this is important thing, that asbestos legacy may be rather than 50 years everywhere in the world. It could be much, much longer than that. So asbestos will be with us for a long time. And we have to look at the infrastructure. For example, labeling all the buildings which may contain asbestos. I certainly know that property owners will not like that because the property values will go down. But there's no other way. If people don't know that they have asbestos in building, they liberally continue to use the hammer and bricolage, this kind of do-it-yourself things when you are in your own building without knowing that there's asbestos. So marking asbestos everywhere, and of course banning everywhere you can. It's not easy to stop exporting from Russia and Kazakhstan because they make money out of it, and they certainly continue with the political influence, such as in Sri Lanka, what we heard over here. So I think this is important thing that we do what we can in our countries to make the best out of it. So then I'll leave it to Alec to see what we can discuss on this particular issue.
Thank you very much, Jukka. And I'm sorry for the technical issues, which it looks like we cannot have a webinar without at least one technical issue. And the PowerPoints will all be available. So actually, we have 9 minutes before the scheduled closing of the event, and we have an optional half hour afterwards. So for those who can stay, we have well over half an hour for discussion. And what I thought was we would do what we had planned for the roundtable. And we will go back to the 3 presenters from countries still using asbestos. And what I would like to do, let's go in the order that they presented, which I think starts with Tuan, then Gopal, then Aseni. Just a couple of minutes from each of you, just to get the discussion rolling. What have you heard, both from your colleagues from countries still using asbestos and from countries which have succeeded in banning it, although obviously no country has yet succeeded, as Jukka has just shown, in eliminating it from the environment and eliminating exposure. So what have you heard that is most, what you see as most valuable in the setting that you're facing, that would help in terms of regulation, in terms of transitional incentives, supports? So start with Tuan. Let's try to keep it to 2 or 3 minutes each. So you're putting those ideas on the table before the 10:30 time. And then what we'll do is I think we'll open up to comments from the questions in the chat, and from we'll try to hear as many questions as possible. So Tuan.
Thank you. Yeah, we heard a lot about asbestos disease and the costs associated with them. Some of the reason that these countries have not proceed to the ban because of the economic issue and also the problem and the availability of the substitute. Asbestos have many property that good that people use, rely on. So we need to probably focus more in substitute. We probably need to develop a website, maybe all the asbestos ban advocate. We can put our resources together to create a website that listed all the available substitute out there, which replace what, for example, for fire potential, what product that have fireproof property in combination with other products, and we can list it on the website, and also maybe the cost associated with them, and a way to promote or to give incentive for people to mass produce them so they will be cheaper than asbestos products. Without that, a lot of countries will resist moving toward the ban because they will say, yeah, we still need the products and we don't have any substitute. So we have to remove that barrier by be able to put our head together, get all these substitute property in place, work out the cost, and make it available somehow. I think that's one of my comments. Thank you.
Let's turn to Gopal. Along similar lines, Gopal, what have you heard that is most helpful in the extremely difficult situation that you're facing in India that you documented so powerfully?
Actually, in India, the problem is that left hand of the government knows that it needs to be banned, but the right hand is not acting on it. Like Ministry of Health, Ministry of Labor, they both, and Ministry of Environment, they have taken positions in public, sometimes at international conferences, sometimes in the vision document that asbestos of all kinds, including chrysotile asbestos, needs to be phased out or banned. But the powerful ministries of the government, like Ministry of Commerce and Ministry of Chemicals, is not letting the wisdom of Ministry of Health, Ministry of Environment, and Ministry of Labor to prevail. So it's a conflict where entrenched business interests of asbestos industries dating back to the Soviet times, when India had a very tight relationship with USSR. That legacy is continuing. So there was plenty of talk during the presentation about legacy waste. Here is a case of legacy, corporate interests which are well entrenched, that in the conflict between public health and the well-entrenched corporate interest from the Russian asbestos interest, Brazilian asbestos interest, and Indian asbestos interest, they have joined hands to ensure that public health interests do not prevail over naked lust for profit at any human cost. So we keep hearing from the experience of Nepal, experience of South Africa, the experience from even Israel, how they have banned it. But the fact is that here in India knows, Ministry of Mines, for instance, knows that asbestos is harmful to health. Every time a question is raised in Parliament, it is stated in the reply by the government that asbestos mining in India is banned because of its harmful impact on human health. But this same wisdom does not, apply for some strange reason for commerce, for manufacturing and use. So, and also government of India is taking inconsistent positions at international forum. For instance, under the domestic law, asbestos is a hazardous substance. But at the international forum, in the meetings of Rotterdam Convention, it takes a diametrically opposite position, which is contrary to the domestic law. Even under Factories Act, it's a hazardous substance. Even under the Environment Protection Act, the rules made under it, it's a hazardous waste. The asbestos end-of-life products, which are asbestos waste, hazardous waste, they are categorized as hazardous waste. So there is not even an iota of doubt that asbestos is a hazardous substance. There is a compelling scientific logic to ban it. Government of India knows it, but half of Government of India is willing to ban it, and the other half is not letting it banned under the influence, under Russian influence and Brazilian influence, most importantly under the Russian influence. So it seems that in India, the asbestos industry is more, Russian influence is more powerful than Government of India. The Russian industry, interest is more powerful than the interest of public health. That is the situation we are in. There is, what more needs to be done? Government of India knows, in replies it says that some 70 countries have banned asbestos. It knows that it needs to be, mining needs to be banned. Asbestos waste needs to be banned. Asbestos cement roofs on railway platforms, over 7,000 railway stations are being made asbestos free. There are many states like Uttarakhand, union territories like Chandigarh, which have said that asbestos needs to be, phased out, banned. But then the Russian influence is hard to resist, it seems, or the Soviet legacy of and the corporate interests, which are well entrenched, they are not letting Government of India take the position it should take in the interest of public health. And also the electoral financing by corporate interests, which has been legalized through Section 182 of Companies Act. It is not letting Government of India act in public interest. It continues to act in the interest of its donors. So we are caught in a situation where the scientific evidence says that asbestos needs to be banned to protect present generation and future generations to come. In a situation where not a single building in India, including the buildings of embassies, foreign embassies in India, some 70 countries have banned asbestos in India. Their embassies in India are not asbestos free because their water supply pipes are asbestos laden. So what is it the 70 countries need to do to protect their embassy staff, to protect their ambassadors? And all the tourists which are coming to India, they are exposed to asbestos fibers. There is not a single building, including the Prime Minister's building or the Rashtrapati or the Supreme Court. No hospital in India is asbestos free. And in that context, I would say that the medical education in India is not geared. It is not geared up. Its syllabus does not address environmental and occupational health adequately. It's simply some. It is mentioned in passing in the medical education. It is not adequately addressed at the in the MBBS courses here in India. There is lack of occupational health institutions, almost non-existent occupational health institutions. There are not competent doctors to diagnose diseases. Many times diseases are diagnosed, poorly diagnosed or misdiagnosed. When it is occupational disease, it is mentioned as tuberculosis. And at other places, when a worker dies in an asbestos factory, they say a dead person is dead. They don't even mention a dead person as worker. For instance, in the Ramco industry in Bhojpur, in Bihar, when a civil surgeon wrote the report of a death of a worker, he wrote that a dead person is dead, instead of mentioning that a worker is dead. So this I think the situation in India with regard to public health related to asbestos-related diseases is alarming. Nobody is safe. No visitor in India is safe, be it a head of a state, be it a prime minister or anybody who comes to India, UN staff or a WHO staff in India, nobody. WHO recommends that asbestos needs to be phased out. Their own building in India is not asbestos free. WHO building is not asbestos free. So I'm really sharing my agony, and which is shared by all of us, that the sufficient work is not being done, and government is not able to resist corporate interests. Thank you.
Thanks very, very much. We have reached 10:30, so I'll say a few words before Asani speaks. I'm hoping that quite a few of you will be able to stay till 11 o'clock, but I understand that there will be a number of people that will have to leave. So what we're going to do is we'll proceed with Saini with her remarks, and then we'll circle back to the 4 presenters from the countries that have succeeded in banning asbestos, and really with the same question. What have you heard today that you believe is most powerful and important in moving us forward toward a global ban and to eliminating asbestos from our environment? And then we'll try to address some of the questions in the chat, but I think it's important to do what we intended to do with the roundtable. So thank you everyone for coming. Anyone who has to leave, for heaven's sakes, no problem at all. We will have more webinars. We'll have more gatherings. We're going to sort of debrief from this one to figure out what the framework should be as we proceed from here. There's powerful, powerful voices that you've heard, people that you've met for the first time, some with decades of involvement. And this is not the end. This is just the beginning. So thank you all. Thank you to Workplace Health Without Borders. Maybe Marianne, you could post the website address again and how to get in touch. And for anyone who wants to join our asbestos working group, I've posted my email address a couple of times. I'll post it again. And now let's turn to Asani. What have you heard today that is most helpful for the difficult situation you're facing in your country?
See, we have a trade, intrinsically it's linked with our use of asbestos. But the sad thing is, like what Gopal said, even the global north donors, there are countries who, especially some of the Scandinavian countries, who donate a lot of housing in certain areas of the country. And those houses are built with asbestos roofing. So they, in their countries, they're not using asbestos, but in our country, because it's still being used, it's not been banned. They're still, because it's cheaper, So there's things like that happening as well. And then it's like Gopal said, it's not that the ministers, the politicians don't know the harm. They of course they know, but it's they're not going to do anything because of the trade links, because of the poor economic conditions we are currently facing. We do have a lot of alternatives. We have zinc aluminum, and we have clay tiles, which we have been using for generations. My grandparents would have used clay tiles, which are used today as well. And we can improve on those quality. And we actually, as a country, because those are local trades, the clay industry, the tile industry is a local trade, and we can improve that as a small scale or make it large. So what I feel is sometimes, even like Gopal said, even the embassies, it's kind of a double standard where even the countries which have banned are still using that kind of asbestos and not doing anything about, even in their little premises. Even in the housing they may rent out, the staff may stay in. So it doesn't give out a good message even to the public that asbestos is actually not too good. I mean, it's harmful. And also I feel that, creating awareness among the population and making them not use it so much might be another way forward in Sri Lanka, because in the main cities, there's less and less use of asbestos, and there's more use of concrete and zinc aluminum, because one thing, they may be a little bit more expensive. And so if we create more awareness, I think the use can be reduced much, because if we depend on the politicians for a ban, who knows when that will happen. But like you said, like many countries have experienced, it's not if we ban now, we're for another 40, 50 years, we are still going to find all these illnesses and diseases. And then, so we still have the burden of asbestos for a very long time. So we really need to reduce the usage. And the other thing is, the waste management of asbestos debris. It's in households, it's kept as, people don't want to discard it because they feel that they can use it for some other purpose, to cover something. So all these brittle asbestos is just lying around everywhere, and it's just in the common waste. Even though the environmental authorities do say that asbestos is toxic, like in my presentation, but waste handlers are exposed to asbestos as well. So I feel as a country, maybe awareness and finding using more alternatives, making them more affordable might be the way forward for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Aseni. We'll turn to the 4 presenters from the other countries. Ideally, try to keep your remarks in the 1 or 2 minute range, because we really do want a chance for some of the questions to emerge from those who've attended. So we'll start with Jonathan. What have you heard that you see as most promising to achieve our goals?
I mean, in terms of achieving a global ban, it's so difficult, isn't it? Because it's a political issue. But I think that us working together in these forums makes such a huge difference in sharing the knowledge. And I guess my presentation was more about kind of, once you have banned it, what do you do with it after that? Because you're still going to have exposure for decades and decades to come. And, you know, when is the UK going to be free from asbestos? Who knows? What I have learned, and I'm really impressed with in Australia, what the Victorian Eradication Agency have done and are doing, is a national register of asbestos for public buildings. It doesn't relate to everything, and then plan the removal of it. Wow, why for the countries who have banned it, why aren't we doing that? And when you speak to the people who are involved with it, my main question was how did you make this happen? Because technically it is completely possible to do, and it always comes back to a political question. They said it was on the back of an election manifesto, and there was all of the usual arguments. It can't be done, and they've done it, and it's amazing. And I suggest you go out and have a look at their website and see what they're doing. You know, so we can learn from each other best practice, because the legacy is going to go on. You know, I've got 2 kids. I don't want their grandkids to have anything to do with asbestos. And unless we, you know, make a success of this, you know, we'll be sitting here in 150 years' time if we could live that long talking about the same things over and over again. So that's the question that I'm afraid I don't have an immediate answer. But if we learn from each other, then, you know, we've got a really good chance.
Thank you, Jonathan. Kevin, some remarks. It's been such a rich conversation. And what are you taking away in terms of what you think might be most important?
I think just, you know, this is the 4th webinar. The other 3 webinars were 2.5 hours long, each one. And there's a wealth of information there. You know, we had Neil Tomper from the Institute working on Fultoners. But, you know, it's kind of what gets measured gets noticed, what gets noticed gets action. So the information shared by Jukka is amazing. I think the thing that resonates most with me is the opening remarks from Bob Rae. It's about both leadership and the strength of coordination. So we have some amazing leaders here. You know, Jukka, Sujio, Kent Takahashi knows about us. Also think about government leaders. You know, the Australian government, Asbestos, Silica and Safety Eradication Agency, and also the Asbestos and Dust Diseases Research Institute. Just thinking about Marcus Solana, the toxics rapporteur that presented, I sensed that there was some frustration when he was talking about the Rotterdam Convention. We got him to speak, but really, I think the government leaders and other leaders, NGOs, unions, should have a voice to the United Nations, and maybe we could do that through Bob Rae. That's my thinking. Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin. And I'm trying to see if Dr. Marinaccio is still here. Alessandro.
Yeah, hi. Yes, I think that the debate is very interesting. I think that one of the key point is the capacity for the scientific community to calculate the real extent of asbestos-related disease country by country with the effort of scientific evidence. In my opinion, this is very important, and is a key point, because many of us have said, and is correct, that asbestos is cheaper. And is correct, asbestos is cheaper, but only if we don't calculate the costs of health effect of asbestos use. If we calculate completely the cost of asbestos, asbestos is not cheaper. It's very expensive, very, very, very expensive for all our communities. So if we want to discuss the costs and the benefits of the part toward the asbestos ban, we have to calculate the cost of asbestos completely, including the health effect. And to calculate the health effect, we have to have the capacity to estimate the extent of asbestos-related disease completely. And this is not available at this time. And this is a real problem. The second point, in my opinion, that is strongly correlated to the first is that we have to have the capacity to tell the stories of the exposed people and the stories of affected people, because the epidemiological estimates are very strong, as I have said, in many fields, but the stories of affected people are completely substantial for discuss correctly of this theme, is my opinion. Thank you.
And let's finish off with Sophie, and then Jukka, perhaps you could have some closing remarks after Sophie. And I would like to recognize someone very important on this call, Sugio Furuya from Japan. So perhaps after Jukka, Sugio, if you could prepare to say a few things about the tremendous deep experience you've had in these issues and what you're taking away from the conversation. So Sophie, we'll start with you, then Jukka and Sugio.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So I agree very much with the issue of substitutes, but I think there are many substitutes available. And maybe to share what is used in different countries as substitutes will help in a positive way, just thinking about what our colleague from Vietnam had to say. Then in our experience, the training of health workers in the recognition of asbestos-related diseases have been of critical importance. I don't think we can underestimate that, because if you don't make the diagnosis, if it's overlooked or underdiagnosed or suppressed for whatever reason, then it's a problem. But if health workers are trained to diagnose it, then certainly, and we in this context, of course, found the ILO X-rays on the international standard for pneumoconiosis very, very, very useful. So that kind of training that these days, it doesn't take that much because of the way that so much of the training can be done online. Then I think, and Aseni, I suppose here particularly, I heard the frustration of all three of you. But looking for solutions, we have found with asbestos is sort of multifactorial. And I think it's critically important to, in whatever we continue to do in small ways every day, whether it be at workplaces, whether through health, through advocacy, all those things that we can help with through in international forum, we have to work towards a ban. Because you see, the more we continue to introduce asbestos in our environment, the longer the exposure and the legacy and the harder our tasks. So I just want to leave you with those. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Sophie. And I will add from the Canadian experience that the documentation of the extent of asbestos disease has been crucial, and then putting a human face to that disease. I cannot tell you how often, I think it was dozens of times, I would meet with mesothelioma victims, and the first thing they would say is, how can I use the months I have left in life to make an impact on this issue? A really significant proportion of the patients with mesothelioma wanted to do that. So combining the data and the human face has been very important. So I know we have Tuan with his hand up. So let's go Jukka, then Sugio, then Tuan.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Eric. I am Sugio Furuya. coordinators of BAM Asbestos Network Japan, established in 1979, and Asian BAM Asbestos Network, established in 2007. As you know, the United States has finally introduced a ban on asbestos, and Cambodia government announced its intention to introduce a ban on asbestos in next year. Also, we have more development in EDB, ADB, IPF, etc. So please consider the current situation very seriously. I think this year and next year are very important to achieving a ban on asbestos in Asia and in the world. We need more concentrated effort to achieve a ban on asbestos. Already, we have discussed more activities in Asian countries. So, if you want to work with us, please contact me freely. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sugio. And Sugio has been very modest. He's played an enormous role in world efforts to win a ban on asbestos for decades now, and we're very grateful. So Jukka and then Tuan, and we're going to have enough time if we go till 11, if Jukka and Tuan have short remarks. If there's anyone else who has something pressing they want to say, just put up your hand and we'll try to get one or two questions in to this part of the meeting. So Jukka?
Thank you. What needs to be done? I think missing information is something what we need much more. When I was talking with my colleagues in Bulgaria, Bulgaria reported 5 mesothelioma cases in a year to WHO. Then the medical doctors who did all this, they identified 55 mesothelioma cases. And that is not the case of Bulgaria only. Mesothelioma numbers are only a fraction of what is the reality. So, and if mesothelioma numbers are high, exposures are high, and that means that all the numbers are much bigger. So we need better and better and better numbers for that. Then secondly, the cost. I think Alejandro was saying that we need to have something to count that if people think that it's too expensive to change the asbestos roof to something different, or even building new asbestos roofs, I think we have to see what is the price for having that additional expense to get it from other materials like clay or steel or whatever, compared to what is the price of losing lives, losing working lives, losing production and health expenses. So this kind of balance between pros and cons, and I think that it's clear all countries that are now banned, they know it, but we also have to show it convincingly to developing countries. Another thing that many developing countries have already banned asbestos. So they have found out, and there's good experience of what to do and how to do it, how to convince their politicians. And then finally, the asbestos infrastructure. Make sure that anything what we do, having every building that contains asbestos labeled, if governments could take some effort on that to identify at least what is exactly the present number of asbestos buildings. For example, in UK, the presentation was that there were practically millions of buildings that contain asbestos. And I think this is really important to find out where we are. So I think these are the main conclusions that we need to do at this point, and that coming nicely out. And if you can still also copy the chat list, because there are a lot of numbers of the interlinks. For example, Sujio's new data included more information, and that Sujio made just yesterday. I saw some of his papers. So looking at the websites of what Sujio has produced would be absolutely vital as well. Thank you very much.
So I'll assure everyone, Marianne is saving all the chat. I'm going to work with the document. I think what I'll do is I'll create the best possible consolidation of the chat that I can with all the web links and everything else. All the PowerPoints will be available. The recording will be available. I think this will be a very well documented conversation. I do want to add one more thing about, and Jukka, those are very, very important remarks, that the issue of data worldwide is one that needs to be pursued. And also, I think that the issue of transition and substitutes, there's a lot of room there for international collaboration. And I know that Barry Castleman and some other people have done some tremendous work on identifying the best possible substitutes. And if somehow we can get industries in these countries still using asbestos to recognize that there are lots of jobs, lots of good jobs, there's a path to transition that will allow countries to continue manufacturing roofing. It just won't have asbestos in it. And people can still make money making it and selling it. Just won't have asbestos in it. So, Tuan.
Thank you. And by the way, if we can make those products 20 or 30% cheaper than asbestos, then the asbestos problem will probably go away. But I do agree with Dr. Takala. Yes. We have missing information. There are only a few cases of asbestos-related disease in Vietnam. And over the years, I searching for more cases, but they are very limited number. And one of the reasons, because we don't have certified B reader in Vietnam. So lately, Dr. Chung at the National Institute of Occupational and Environmental Health have contacted us and asked us to introduce with people from NIOSH, CDC, so that they can provide the training and certification for B reader in Vietnam. And we hope that maybe in 2025, something will happen. We want to train a lot of people in Vietnam to be B readers so they can diagnose the cases properly. Because right now there are only a few cases, that we can count. And with the workforce at one time up to maybe 50,000 people in related industry, and we only have a few cases, that's quite a missing link. Thank you.
So we have 4 more minutes if anyone has anything pressing to add to the conversation. Thank you. Sophie, do you want to speak? It looks like you do.
Yes, I just want to say something and I can't find my hand. I cannot help but thinking that from what I've heard, at a certain point, of course, asbestos is a political issue. And I'm just putting it out there, not that I've got an answer for it, but it seems as though BRICS could be an area where one could also engage the BRICS countries. Just a thought.
This is very promising territory. I'll add one more piece that is coming very prominently in Canada that might apply. Around the world, we must renew our infrastructure for various reasons. One is climate resiliency. And in renewing infrastructure, a lot of issues come into play. So for example, modernizing our HVAC systems, ventilation, air conditioning, etc. A lot of retrofitting has to be done in buildings. So we have to go into millions, probably hundreds of millions of buildings around the world in these coming years, just for climate resiliency. In the case of Canada, protecting the occupants from wildfire smoke. We've had the experience with COVID, protecting people by purifying or filtering air. And of course, in Canada, also in some other countries, we have radon, that is a radioactive material in the air where there's a lot of natural uranium in the rock. So there are a lot of reasons to go into infrastructure, and we are proposing very strongly, with quite a bit of support from our stakeholders, that we don't want to go into buildings 5 times for 5 different reasons. If we're going to go in and do something expensive, once and for all, we need to deal with all the hazards, and certainly asbestos is close to the top of the list. So I'm throwing that out there as one avenue, the infrastructure renewal avenue, which we shouldn't just see as renewing to remediate asbestos and remove it. There's a lot of other things going on at the same time. So any other comments? We have, I guess we have 2 minutes for anyone who has something they really want to add in the conversation. Looks like Marianne, you want to say something in closing?
Oh, you noticed, huh? I was looking for the hand, like Sophie, I was looking for the hand.
Yeah, it's very subtle. I'm noticing everything now.
They keep moving it, yeah. Yeah, I was thinking about, that was such a good point, Alec, about the infrastructure. And I was thinking about development aid. You know, there are a lot of countries and world institutions that give development aid. And they give it for building new infrastructure as well as probably for repairing infrastructure. But they probably never think of helping to get rid of asbestos as part of that. And I think that the business case that people mentioned, if we demonstrated the cost of asbestos disease and what it's costing all these countries, it could be a very powerful case for why, if they are giving funds for infrastructure development or maintenance, it should include protecting people from asbestos as part of that.
This seems to really be resonating. And also I'm thinking now, a good session for a webinar would be, a good topic would be this very topic, going into it in more depth. And another one going into more depth on the substitutes and the type of replacement industries that could be brought into play. So I'm going to close the event. It's 11, and over half the people who attended this, at the height of it, it was around 225 people from around the world, truly around the world, the way we've dreamed of at Workplace Health Without Borders. Well, over half of you stayed right till 11 o'clock Eastern, and I don't even know what time that is in Australia. It's got to be very late. And in lots of other parts of the world, it's getting very late in the evening. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming. There's lots more to come. We've seen the power of this collaboration. We're going to see lots more. So thank you, everyone. Thank you to our presenters. Thank you to Workplace Health Without Borders, and especially Marianne for hosting. And thank you all for participating.